Well, in honor of it being the Spotify Unwrapped season that people are getting those lists of all the songs that they listen to over and over and over again and are posting it all onto social media, do you really care what people listen to? I mean, I don't. Anyway, but that was a remixed version of our opening intro, courtesy of Vanessa Vandenez this morning, just to make sure that she said to keep me on my toes, but we'll see if that's in fact the case. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition, or as we like to call it around here, and I don't think it's soon enough, the Friday Eve edition of the program. Hope you're having a fantastic day. It was a little brisk this morning. I was up early, and it was a little frosty, a little cool. Things warming up a little bit. I think we're above zero now. If not, we're very close to it. It looks like a little bit, though, of a deep freeze is on the way. Minus 13 tonight. And then if you factor in the wind, that's going to feel more like minus 23. So this is at least, I mean, we had a couple of minus 6, couple of minus 7s, but minus 13 with a minus 23 wind chill is really the first really cold day. And that's going to happen tonight. Minus 6 will be the high temperature tomorrow with that wind chill factored in. It'll be around minus 13. It won't be as windy as it was yesterday, but it'll still be a little bit frigid out there. We're getting a warm-up on Saturday, though. Alistair says that the forecast is going to go up above 0 to +1, +4 on Sunday, so it might be a good time for you to go out and get that Christmas tree if you haven't already done so on the weekend. Isn't it that one of the many different signs of that the Christmas season's upon us? I was out yesterday afternoon after the show, and I was walking through the neighborhood, and there was somebody that had their car and had the Christmas tree, wrapped up Christmas tree on the roof. A successful Christmas tree hunter, as they call themselves. Anyway, it might be a good weekend this weekend as the temperatures warm up. A little bit frigid out there tonight. Well, did you see the news yesterday? Premier Houston throwing down the gauntlet on Nova Scotia Power. He's now calling for the Nova Scotia Energy Board to formally investigate this whole estimated billing business. And this is his quote. And I was quite surprised at the language that the Premier used on this, but this is his quote. And it says, knowingly overbilling would constitute regulatory fraud, and misrepresenting revenue to the markets is a form of securities fraud. Pretty strong words from the Premier of Nova Scotia to the utility here in Nova Scotia. He says the investigation would determine the legalities and to see if the utility should be subject to financial penalties. Well, what to do with Nova Scotia Power? I have a thought or two on that, as you may imagine. I think that, and we've talked about this on the open hour, I think it was yesterday, that if we levy a fine against the utility, at the end of the day, it's you and I and Vanessa and everybody else that has to pay that fine because their revenue, most of it comes from ratepayers. So here's my suggestion, and it's something you might want to talk about when we open up the telephone lines after 11 o'clock today. I think if you're going to send a message to Nova Scotia Power, I think if you're going to send a message to its parent company, Emera, and to its board and its shareholders, here's my thought. If this investigation, and first off, I don't think that the UARB or the Nova Scotia Energy Board should be responsible for this investigation. We've seen the utility board treat Nova Scotia Power essentially with kid gloves, right? There's not a lot of pushback when it comes to rate increases. So I think that if it is securities fraud, let's bring the feds in. Let the security investigators take a look at this. And if there is impropriety that is found in this, and they are in fact committing this, A, criminal prosecution, B, what do you think about limiting the ability for Nova Scotia Power to increase rates for 5 years? Cap it. I know, caps, I know. But cap it at CPI or 0.5% below CPI for 5 years. You're only allowed to raise power rates in Nova Scotia 2% or whatever CPI is for 5 years. That will hit their bottom line that won't impact you and I, at least for those 5 years. And you can bet that that's going to impact the board and the shareholders of its parent company. Just food for thought. Open hour in 55 minutes, and I look forward to your conversations on that. The other big story today, and we're going to tackle this a little bit in the first hour today, the Canada Food Price Report is out, and it's got some ugly numbers attached to it. It's predicting that you and I and Vanessa and everybody else will pay between 4 and 6% more for groceries next year. So for a family of 4, according to these numbers, that's a $994.63 increase in groceries next year. Just let that sink in for a minute. If you take a look at the numbers over the whole year, again, family of 4, $17,571.79 to put food into the house. That's like $338 a week-ish, which works out to like, what, $1,460, $1,464 a month just for groceries for a family of 4. Now, Sylvain Charlebois is one of the authors, if not the lead author on this report. And we're going to have him on the show here very shortly to dig into these numbers and figure out, is this just basics? Is this, comfortable? I put quotes around that numbers. But if you sit back and you run the numbers and you do the math, and I will, and you well know that math isn't my strong suit. But at $1,464 a month, if that's net, right? That's not gross. That's net on a household income. I punched this into AI this morning, and I will put the caveat on it that this was AI, it wasn't my math. If you take $2,500, and I think I'm being generous for rent for a family of 4. Most people that have a family of 4 have 3 bedrooms. I looked at 2 bedrooms, and I kind of averaged it. So at $2,500 a month for rent, $1,464 a month for groceries, net, you'll need to gross or the gross amount of money for your household income just to fill the fridge and just for have a roof over your head, $65,000 a year for a family of 4. Now, obviously, everybody's different. Some people can live more Spartan than others. It's not the same for a family of 2 with no kids. It's not the same for a single person. It's probably much worse for a single parent. And again, I put a caveat on my math. But that just puts it into perspective for you. We were just talking about minimum wage yesterday, right? Now that's household income. That's not single income for a person, right? If it's 2 earners and 2 kids, before you get transportation, before you have insurance, before you have anything, utilities, it's $65,000 gross. Something else, isn't it? As I mentioned earlier, we will be bringing Sylvain Charlebois on here right after the first break, and we're going to dig into this report, so make sure you stay around, and we'll dig into it and see what it means for you and what it means for Nova Scotia as part of the program today. And the other piece of news that kind of broke yesterday was that the province is having a news conference here around 11 o'clock. And they're going to announce what they're labeling it as a crackdown on illegal cannabis. Not a lot of information yet. It was just one of these heads up. There's a news conference coming. The minister will be standing up and answering questions and laying out the province's plan to crack down on this black market cannabis that's in Nova Scotia. I'm curious. And hopefully the minister will address it, and we'll bring you what we can as the show goes on when this announcement's made today. But I'm curious, why now? Why so long after cannabis was legalized? Are suddenly the black market going to be the target of some kind of increased enforcement? Would have made sense to me if there would have been a serious crackdown on illegal cannabis on day 2 after cannabis was legalized and NSLC started selling pot in Nova Scotia. That would have made sense to me because people would tell me that the quality was better on the black market, the pricing was better at times on the black market, but they were in direct competition, illegal as it is, with NSLC and their profit and the government tax revenue that's associated with it. So why now is this going to be a thing? We'll dig into it as much as we can. Like I said, the news conference happening in about an hour or so, and we'll get that information out to you as it becomes available. This is the Thursday or Friday Eve edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. When we come back, $994.63 more to fill your grocery cart, according to the latest Canada Food Price Report. Lead author and food professor Sylvain Charlebois will be your guest when we come back. You are listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. We'll see you in minutes. Welcome back. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand, and some sobering numbers in a new report that was released today, Canada's Food Price Report 2026, forecasting that overall food prices will increase by 4 to 6%. The average family of 4 expected to spend $17,571.79 on food in 2026, an increase of up to $994.63 from last year. The quote attached to the release on this report says this: despite steadier inflation, Canadian families are still feeling the squeeze at the grocery store. Our forecast for 2026 makes one thing clear: food affordability will remain a major pressure point as the year ahead. And that is attributed to our next guest, the project lead at Dalhousie University on this. He's also from the Food Analytics Lab, and we just call him the food professor around here, and that is Dr. Sylvain Charlebois. Sylvain, how are you?
Good morning, Dan, and please don't shoot the messenger here. We're 25 authors from around the country from 8 different universities, so
all right.
Yeah. I mean, we work with AI and machine learning, and unfortunately, numbers that we got from our model weren't great, and so we agreed that the model was trustworthy, and that's what we're going with.
Sylvain, your quote is: despite steadier inflation, and we're still going to feel the pinch at the grocery store. Why is it that when we get these numbers and we talk to you about food inflation month to month from Stats Canada, that we're starting to see some relief, yet we're seeing this big, I'm going to call it a big increase in the grocery bill next year?
Well, I mean, it's over the last 5 years we've seen major events affecting food prices. Of course, there was the pandemic, which really weakened supply chains. Ukraine came along 2 years after, with Vladimir Putin basically capitalizing on weaker supply chains. That really just affected everyone just violently. Now, well, with geopolitics, things are getting complicated, but not as complicated as they used to. So really, essentially, what we're dealing with is the effects of climate change. There's also some disturbance in the food industry overall. I mean, the food industry, unlike what some people may think, actually, the food industry is not doing well. There's a lot of tension within the supply chain, which is why we're talking a lot about the code of conduct to discipline the market and help processors, food manufacturers to survive and allow consumers to have more choices and bring more competition to the table.
The grocery stores play a role in these higher prices, Sylvain?
I mean, they set prices, but they have to pay some cost. They have to pay for their food. And if you look at gross margins in general, you do know that gross margins have actually remained the same as in the last 5 years. So I would say right now, if you're trying to blame grocers, well, they deserve some criticism because of what happened recently with the bread price fixing scheme. But there's other factors at play here.
So then you're much more plugged into this industry than I am, but when I see top line data come from Empire or from Weston, and they're showing, I think in August we saw a $212 million profit attached to Sobeys, which of course is a pretty big chain, a 91 cent per diluted share profit. People have trouble understanding that those gross margins are tight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are nominal dollars, and those nominal dollars can be impressive. I agree. I mean, if you look at that net profits for all three major chains, it's over $4 billion. So it is significant. But when you look at the grand scheme of things, it's basically about 3% of all revenues generated by the sector. So you have to sell a whole lot of food to generate about 3% of profits. And I'll remind you, Dan, the Royal Bank of Canada just posted its result for the last quarter, and one bank made more money in one quarter than all grocers combined throughout the year, just so you know.
Oh, and I understand that, but at the end of the day, we have to eat, right? So
that's right, but banks are responsible mostly for our roofs, mortgages, and things like that. That's a necessity as well. So I do think that the attacks and the criticism that has been directed towards grocers is a little unfair, given the fact that they are dealing with low margins. And like I said, gross margins have remained the same, and most of the time, the same store food sales have actually been below food inflation, which means that they often make way more money selling T-shirts, cosmetics, pharmaceutical drugs, especially drugs. I mean, that's a big money maker for grocers. They all have pharmacy chains, and that's how they make their money.
Sylvain, we're still looking at a 2% increase in prices in food inflation this year. Is that correct?
Pretty much. Well, for 2025, we're probably going to end the year at around 3.4%, which is exactly what we forecasted last year. Meat being a big driver. But again, Dan, I would say that we're in a different place compared to a few years ago. A few years ago, we weren't ready for a high food inflation rate. Now, what I'm seeing right now are consumers, they go out, they've done their homework, they know their prices. Look at Gateway in Dartmouth. There's a reason why they expand in there, because people are noticing that there are good deals out there. Independent grocers are doing a good job. You don't have to go to big stores to save money. You can also go to smaller stores where they have good deals.
You mentioned beef, Sylvain, and according to the report, we saw almost a 20% increase in the price for beef in the first quarter of 2025. What is 2026 holding? Am I going to have to take beef completely out of my grocery list?
You're probably going to buy less. For sure. The problem that we're facing with beef is that there's the echo effect affecting chicken and pork as well. And so in 2026, we're expecting that the three components of the meat trifecta to be more expensive, unfortunately. So for 2026, you're not going to turn into a vegetarian, Dan, but you're probably going to be looking around for other sources of protein like fish and seafood, which can be expensive, but my guess is that you'll be looking at, vegetable protein. Why not? Once in a while. But you're not going to turn into a vegetarian anytime soon, I don't think.
$17,000 and change for a family of four. That, I'm assuming, is the national number. Sylvain, is it any different? Did you break it down into regions? And do we know what the Maritimes or Nova Scotia, if it's similar to that?
Yeah, depending of the province, some will be above average, some will be below. For Nova Scotia, it will be, unfortunately, will be above average. I believe New Brunswick will be below average. But overall, I mean, for those who don't have two adults and two teenagers in their family, because the $17,500, that's for a family of four with two adults, men, women, and two teenagers, a girl and a boy. But if you have a different family, you can actually look into the report and reconstruct your own family and see exactly how much you should be paying for food in 2026. There are some good news here. I mean, in the report, for bakery and if you're into cheeses or dairy products, we're not expecting any price changes for those categories, at least.
Sylvain, just for context on this, when you talk about a family of four and a couple teenagers, is this Food Guide recommended grocery buy, or what was the parameters that you used to look at these prices?
The food basket actually changes every year because we have dietitians on our team, and they tend to look at diets very differently, especially right now with an acute attention on proteins in general. You would have noticed that you buy anything right now, there's protein in it, and so there is this context that is impacting how we structure the diet this year. But overall, I mean, I do think that there are ways for people to get their protein fix in an affordable manner, and also for fiber as well. The other good news, by the way, the Buy Canadian movement, we thought would have actually cost Canadians money. It didn't. If you look at produce, for example, the inflation rate dropped for fruits and vegetables in 2025. So while grocers were pivoting away from American products because nobody wanted them, well, at the end of the day, it didn't cost us more to get food from Peru, South Africa, or Mexico. So that's good news. And we are expecting vegetables to continue to benefit from that pivot. But fruits are going to likely increase by 3 to 5% because there's a different dynamic there.
Sylvain, very quickly, we're almost out of time. Your advice for those that are staring down the barrel of a $1,000 increase in their grocery bill this year, what's the best way to save money?
Look at your loyalty programs. I mean, don't shy away from using loyalty. There's a lot of money there, and grocers want your loyalty. Foot traffic is down for both Loblaw and Sobeys. They want you back. Why? Because, they want to generate more revenues. A lot more people are going to independent grocers. And the other thing, of course, go to independent grocers. Smaller stores don't necessarily offer more expensive food. It's actually the opposite sometimes. You'll be surprised. I
hear that a lot, Sylvain, is how an independent grocer, and you mentioned Gateway earlier, is able to sell products. The Gateway is the example we use. Meat cheaper than Sobeys or Loblaw, who are just mammoth.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why, and I get this question a lot, the reason why a company like Gateway can actually offer some really good deals, they work the supply chain very differently. Instead of having 20,000 vendors, they'll probably have like 100, 200, 300 vendors, and they actually keep a close eye on deals. And sometimes their products are rejected by main chains, and so it's not because they're not good, or it's just sometimes there could be a labeling issue. The delivery was late. There are several reasons why lots are rejected, and companies like Grocery Gateway have actually figured out a way to recover some of these losses and offer us deals. And I certainly would encourage people to take advantage of that.
So then, appreciate your time, sir.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
That is Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, one of the authors of this report, a Canada Food Price Report 2026. It's available online if you Google that. One quarter, 25% in Canada, Canadian households considered to be food insecure. That number much higher here in Nova Scotia. You have to keep your hands on your wallet when you walk into the grocery store these days, it seems, doesn't it? We're back after the news. time here on the program, and rightfully so, discussing Nova Scotia Power and this cyber attack and the response from Nova Scotia Power to the cyber attack being the credit monitoring and the scale at which the cyber attack affected people. First it was a little bit, then there was some more, then it was everybody, but then others have told me that Nova Scotia Power has told them they weren't impacted. It goes on, and now the Premier weighing in on some of the after effects of the cyber attack. Of course, we've talked about estimated bills on the program. They can't access or don't trust, which often raises questions with me. The data that's coming from the smart meters, so they're estimating your bills and say they're going to do that until March. And the Premier yesterday dropping the gauntlet saying, nope, we need an investigation into this now. It could be fraud, which was pretty strong language coming from the leader of the province. So we're very pleased to welcome back to the show. He comes on periodically from Dalhousie University, and that is Larry Hughes. Larry, how are you?
Oh, very well, Dan. Yourself?
Good. We're not talking about power generation today. We're talking about power distribution, I guess, of sorts, right? And you authored an op-ed on this cyber attack that was in all Nova Scotia, and have some experience in other places in the country seeing these kind of events unfold, and are raising some questions here about what's going on with Nova Scotia Power.
Oh, well, it wasn't in Canada. It was when I was living in Vilnius, working at the NATO Energy Security Center in 2015. In December 2015, there was a cyber attack, I will explain the difference subsequently, but it was an attack on the operational technology of the electricity supplier in Kyiv, and it started knocking out traffic lights, street lights, and so forth, and it just played pure havoc on the town, and it turned on the city, and it turned out to be that it appeared to be Russian cyber hackers infiltrating the computers that controlled the street lights, turning on and off power stations, deciding where electricity would be routed to and through which paths it would take. So we aren't the first. Fortunately, in our case, it was the information technology. Well, fortunately, I use that word rightly. It was on the information technology side as opposed to the operational technology side. Because had it been on the operational technology side, we might not be having this conversation because there might not be any lights. That's, from what I've been told, was one of the targets of the cyber attack, that they did get into Nova Scotia Power's information technology side. The information technology side is essentially the customer side of the business, your billing, your payroll, and so forth. The problem with it, though, is it's connected to the internet. And as soon as you're connected to the internet, malicious players can package software in such a way that it can infiltrate your machine and start running. And if somewhat like the submarines, run silent, run deep, the idea is these don't make themselves known, and they hide in the background doing, again, nefarious things. Anyway, the important thing from the operational side, we'll just mention this at the end right now, from the operational side, there was an air gap, or the equivalent of an air gap, between the information technology side and the operational technology side, because had it been connected, the attack could have got into the grid and played havoc with the computers there. Instead, it's the lesser of two evils, I suppose. It got the information technology side, and that is the problem the company is facing right now. How to restore this, and let's not just restore that. They also have to restore public confidence. because that's one of the things cyber attackers want to do is when they attack critical infrastructure like data, they're quite happy to see if people die, if there's economic impacts, and also perhaps most importantly is to harm public confidence, because then it's a case of you no longer trust the system. And there have been cyber hacks on the provincial governments. A few years ago, you might recall, there was MoveIt software, and the MoveIt software was cracked, and upwards of 100,000 Nova Scotia health records apparently were lost, and, well, who knows where they are right now. So cyber hacks like this are commonplace.
Larry, boy, lots of questions that come out of that. I think our listeners can understand, the logic anyway behind the attack in Ukraine. Precursor to a Russian invasion of that country. Why would actors or whatever, or however they're being described here in Russia, want to target Nova Scotia Power specifically and get our data?
Okay, again, we look upon the whole issue here is critical infrastructure. What do we need to run our community? And you can say, at one level, no, we're not at war with Russia. However, we are supporting Ukraine. And what Russia would like to do, well, we've seen what Russia does with normal warfare techniques. Normal warfare techniques are attacking power stations and so forth. And again, this is just explaining it. They're being very clever in attacking the heating plants in various towns and cities in Ukraine. And by attacking the heating plants, they will be essentially destroying or removing or reducing the ability to heat people's homes. So what they're trying to do is have people doubt the state. Now, why would Russia attack here? Well, as I said, we are supporting Ukraine. We've spent, I believe, upwards of $800 million. We are supporting Ukraine. So it would be nice to, from the Russian point of view or from the hackers' point of view, to start making us doubt the system. And what could they do? Well, a very simple thing to do is attack the power system. And that is what they've done. They apparently didn't get as far as they'd hoped, that is, attack the operational side, but they did attack the information technology side. And it has been, in many respects, highly successful, because many people weren't overly pleased with Nova Scotia Power to start with. And this has just increased the dislike by many people of Nova Scotia Power. And so my feeling is the reason you would attack something like this is it just makes you start doubting the system. And by doing that, it's, this is just so terrible. We can't even get electricity. Well, fortunately, we are getting electricity. The bad news is we're not getting our proper bills.
As long as the wind doesn't blow.
Well, actually, I was going to say, you want the wind to blow so you can get the wind turbine.
Understood. Larry, we're almost out of time. The CEO of Nova Scotia Power has said that it's going to take until at least March to get back to the smart meters. To the layperson, and I'll put myself in that category, that feels like it's a long time since this hack happened, to get back online. And in the future, because these meters are connected to the internet, as you say, should we be concerned that they're accurate?
The meters themselves, I do not believe, are connected to the internet. I could be wrong on that. My understanding is they are connected to the telephone network.
Okay.
So there is a degree of security there. And from what I understand, the attack came through the internet. But the attackers, and this is an interesting problem, and I hope we have enough time for me to mention this.
Sure.
The hardware, the computers, and the software that Nova Scotia Power and others use on their computer systems are well known. So if the hackers in Russia or wherever would get the software and start seeing how can we break it. And from what I understand, they did a bang-up job. They have gone through and destroyed the communication software between Nova Scotia Power and its customers and their meters. The meters are still working. It's just that they can't get that information out. And I mean, this could be another story, and it probably should be discussed. And that is, how can the meters be read and people be confident that the meters have been read?
Yeah, the confidence piece is a big one. Is this length of time in situations like this, in these kind of attacks, does it normally take many months to get things returned to normal?
It can take multiple months, and we've seen in hospitals in Newfoundland and Labrador, the hospital there, I believe it was in St. John's, or the entire health system, I can't recall now, but it took months to get things back on an even keel and make sure that it wouldn't happen again. And that's part of the problem. You have to make sure that you're not going to throw the switch, it comes up, and the next thing you know, you're attacked again. So one could argue that what Nova Scotia Power is doing is trying to make this as secure as possible so that when they do throw the switch on, 5 minutes later, they're not attacked again.
Larry, we're out of time. I appreciate you joining us today, and some fascinating insight there.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
That is Larry Hughes, a now retired professor over at Dalhousie University. When we come back, it seems it's been a while since we've had any Moosehead action down at the Scotiabank, as that place got turned into a curling rink, and what a show they put on down there. But the Mooseheads will return home, and we're going to set it up for you this weekend with a brief conversation with our play-by-play announcer. That is Garreth MacDonald, and he will be joining us right after the break. All right, welcome back. As we roll along here on a Thursday, if you're looking for something to do this weekend, the Halifax Mooseheads are returning to the friendly confines of Scotiabank Centre as they return from a road trip that saw them into Quebec and over it for a historic stop in Newfoundland and Labrador as they took on the regiment for the first time since that team joined the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Very pleased to welcome back to the show our play-by-play announcer, the best in the queue, that's Garreth MacDonald. Garreth, how are you?
Wonderful, Dan. I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me and flattering me as usual.
It's not flattery. It's the honest to goodness truth, my friend. Anyway, the Quebec road trip will start there. Some good results, some not so good results. Your thoughts on this lengthy road swing through Quebec? Yeah,
it was like you said, some good and some not so good. I mean, you look back to that Quebec road trip, the first game in Quebec City at the Videotron Center, and I thought that was a pretty tight game between a couple of young teams on the rise. Went to a shootout, and Mooseheads got a clutch goal from Sean Carrier to extend the shootout. Nice winner from Yazoo Metsinen to clinch it, and some great saves from Owen Bresson as well. So it started off well enough, and then they went into Baie-Comeau. They had a game against a Drakkar team that's in the Q League basement, and I would say it wasn't their finest game on the trip, but they were resilient. They found a way to get it done. I think they came away with a 5-4 win in that game to sweep the season series against Baie-Comeau, and after that it was on to Chicoutimi, and that was a tough one. Third game in 4 days. The Mooseheads, they lost Danny Walters. He got kicked out of the game in the first period. They lost Mathieu Taillefer, their veteran defenseman, to an injury in that game, and maybe a little bit of fatigue caught up with them as well because the wheels fell off. I think 9-3 was the final of that game. At that point, that was the toughest loss of the season, and after that, it was on to Newfoundland. As you said, a historic trip back to Newfoundland. I think it was the first time the team was there in in 17 plus years, not since the days of the St. John's Fog Devils, and I think Groundhog Day 2008. That was the last time that the Moose had made a trip over there. So that was a long time coming, long time since there's been Q hockey on the Rock, and the travel day was not without its fair share of hiccups. I think the team left Dartmouth, their practice facility at the RBC Center, at 6 a.m., and by the time they checked into the hotel, it was 5 a.m. in Newfoundland.
Yikes.
So, that was a tough day. Because the team is traveling with so much gear, you can't just jump on one of the little regular flights that go back and forth direct. You got to go to Toronto first, and then it was in Toronto where they encountered some issues, and it was a bit of a mess getting to Newfoundland. But despite obviously not getting a ton of sleep, the team came out and they had a pretty solid game, 8-5 win. It was a wild game, 3 5-on-3 power play goals for the Mooseheads. A bit of an undisciplined night for Newfoundland, and you got to be happy to come away with a couple of points after that. But I would say in that game, it felt like the team was mostly running on adrenaline, because the next night, the rematch, much different story. Newfoundland scores in the first shift of the game, just 17 seconds in. They capitalize on a double minor for high sticking to Mooseheads captain Owen Phillips, get a couple of power play goals there, and they're down 3-0. Less than 6 minutes in, and by the time it was all said and done, 7-0 result. First time the team was shut out all year. It was again a bit of a tough conclusion there to that extended road trip.
And a long road trip at that, because we know that the Scotiabank Centre was occupied by the Olympic curling trials.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look back early on in the season, the team did play a lot of games back in October. I think there were 7 games on home ice in the Scotiabank Centre. With the Olympic trials going on, just 2 games on home ice in the month of November. So I think come Saturday night, I think the fan base, Moose Country, will be pretty hungry, pretty excited to get a little bit of Q League hockey back on home ice. So, we're looking forward to that matchup on Saturday night against the Rouyn-Noranda Huskies.
And no pushover, the Rouyn-Noranda Huskies, number 2 in the West right now, and sitting on 15 wins on the season as they come into Halifax.
Yeah, exactly. This is a team that it just feels like, year after year, it doesn't matter who's on that roster. You can kind of expect the same thing from the Huskies each and every season. And they've had, since my time calling games here, they've had a lot of different coaches as well. There's been a fair bit of turnover, but it does seem like, I don't know if it's from the GM, just the ownership group, but year after year, it's a team that always seems to play the same way, similar identity every year. And the Mooseheads would know them pretty well as well. The guys that are back on the team this year, they would know the returnees from the Huskies well from the playoffs last year. Mooseheads falling to them in a 4-game series sweep in the second round. But again, a team that just plays fast, direct style. They don't overcomplicate the game. It's pretty simple. It's pretty effective. And again, when the Huskies are in town, you can expect some compete, some hard work. That's always built right into their DNA. They come at you in waves. So. Yeah, the Moose, we got to look at them back on, we got to look at the Huskies in Rouen back on October 31st, Halloween. I thought it was one of the better first periods on the road in Rouen that I can recall. I think Halifax was up 3-1 after the first period, but the Huskies found a way. They were pretty resilient in that game. They ended up taking it in overtime. Got an overtime goal from Antoine St. Laurent on a power play in the first minute. So, I think the Mooseheads, when you look back to what happened in the playoffs last year, when you look back to what happened on Halloween, and look back to what happened on Saturday night in Newfoundland, I think we can expect maybe a hungrier effort and a more determined effort from the Moose.
And a busy weekend for the Moose this weekend as they host the Huskies on Saturday night, and then a quick turnaround on Sunday afternoon to face Val d'Or.
Yeah, the Foreur, another team that Look back to their first Quebec road trip. Mooseheads, they dropped that game in Rouen on Halloween. They did pick up a point though with the overtime loss, and the next day they wrapped up in Val-d'Or, and that was a game that it was basically just, I don't know, a 1 minute, maybe a 29-second stretch in the first period that just kind of killed them. They gave up 3 goals in, I think it was 29 seconds in the first period of that one, and that kind of that got them out of the game. They were never quite able to recover. Val-d'Or, they got some talent. If you look at their top line, Philippe Veinotte, I think he's second right now in scoring in the league. He's a real talented player. They got Maxime Courcelle. They got some skill up front in their top 6. So they play with a lot of pace. They're a team that's got a lot of speed. They can counter quick. So I think in terms of the play away from the puck, that's going to have to be pretty tight this weekend against a Val-d'Or team. I mean, this is a winnable game for sure for the Moose, but they'll have to be ready when some of those big boys are out for the 4.
You can listen to Garrett's call on Saturday night starting at 6:30 right here on 95.7 News Radio. Thanks for joining us, my friend, and we'll see you on the weekend.
Looking forward to it, Dad. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
Garreth MacDonald, the best in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. As mentioned, the Mooseheads are taking on Val-d'Or on Sunday at 3, and if you want to go, we have a pair of tickets available for you right now. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Sunday afternoon hockey at Scotiabank Centre. The hometown Halifax Mooseheads against Val-d'Or. We'll take caller number 5. Best of luck. Open hour after the news. Welcome back. It is now time for the open hour. Telephone lines are open. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Normal rules apply. You can bring whatever it is to the table, and we'll have a conversation about it. That's the beauty of open line radio. A couple of things that piqued my interest over the last day or so. You heard our conversation with Sylvain Charlebois. $994.63 more for a family of 4 to buy groceries next year. $17,571.79 for 12 months. So for a family of 4, according to this data, $338 a week in groceries. We know we're in an affordability crisis. We know the cost of everything is skyrocketing, and the stuff that we need probably most, other than shelter, of course, is food, and we're going to pay that much more for it next year, according to Canada's Food Price Report. Also, yesterday, Premier of Nova Scotia released a letter. He's in Boston, by the way, for the tree lighting and for meetings, I guess, with the governor of Massachusetts. But he released a letter that he had fired off yesterday to the utility board, the energy board as it's called now, asking for a official, legit investigation into this process that Nova Scotia Power is going through of overestimating our power bills. The Premier using some pretty serious language in there. And just to give you a little bit of an idea how serious, and I quote, knowingly overbilling would constitute regulatory fraud, and also misreporting revenue to the markets is a form of securities fraud. The Premier demanding an investigation into this. I have suggested that the UARB may not have the right tools to do this, and if it is a securities issue, why not let the feds at it? Or if it's fraud, maybe this is a criminal investigation. The Premier saying that he wants to determine legalities to see if the utility should be subject to financial penalties. I suggested off the top of the show, instead of fining Nova Scotia Power, which at the end of the day is going to end up just coming out of your wallet and my wallet, how about this? If it's determined that this is inappropriate, if this is not legal, if this is fraud, as the Premier has alluded to, and Nova Scotia Power is found to have broken those rules, how about this for a penalty? And I'm curious to your thoughts on it. For a period of time, I said 5 years off the top of the show, Nova Scotia Power is limited in its ability to increase rates. We can tack it to CPI, we can tack it to half a point under CPI, whatever. That would hurt them financially. That hurts their parent company, Emera, financially, and you can bet that the shareholders and everybody else is going to be upset by it, because that wouldn't give them the ability to get that guaranteed 9% return on their investment. I'm curious to see what your thoughts on that are. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. To the phones. We welcome Tim to the show to start us off. Tim, how are you?
Morning, Dan. How are you?
Good. What's on your mind?
Very good. Well, two things. One, in addition to the Mooseheads this weekend, so is the opening for the Halifax Thunderbirds.
Right.
And,
yes.
No doubt,
you were correct.
Yes, and no doubt it'll be an exciting season. But in any ways, in regards to Nova Scotia Power, I'm not sure why it took the minister/premier so long to put the letter together. But in addition to what he's already or have allegedly said in the letter, I don't see anything about how he plans to reimburse the customers for the loss of privacy if, in fact, it adversely affects someone. And I'd be interested to see if there's any more teeth to the letter rather than what we're just hearing briefly. But at the end of the day, there are some people who may be, seriously hurt by the loss of information.
Right.
And, in some cases, it may change people's lives. That's a serious issue. The billing issue I get, how we're going to protect people on a go-forward basis, but I'm extremely concerned about, individuals that have worked all their lives to put their credit together, and all of a sudden now that information is on the dark web. What is the Premier/minister going to do to protect those individuals should they be adversely affected?
I can't agree with you more, Tim. Really, the solution from Nova Scotia Power as of late is to offer us credit monitoring services, which is fine, but does that stop this from happening? Probably not, right? And if it happens and they drain your bank accounts or they blow up your credit, then what happens next? I think that's a great point.
Well, I think it's a fair point, but so far nobody is being held accountable or asking those questions to hold. Is it Mr. Gregg or the Premier or the Minister? Don't know, don't care. But at some point, if individuals who have nefarious reasons to have that information have that, if they're going to, whatever they're going to do with it, if it's you, I, or whomever, at what point will we hold those individuals accountable? I would rather talk about that stuff now than talk about it once the horse has left the barn.
Great call, Tim. I appreciate it, sir.
Cheers.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I was having a conversation with Larry Hughes earlier in the show today, who has some experience dealing with these things and the length of time that it takes. And I made a comment about the keeping the lights on except when the wind blows, and we saw yesterday. And I'm not going to suggest that some of these outages weren't legit yesterday. It was pretty windy, right? But that being said, I got an email from Paul, who says that he's kept records in his neighborhood since 2019. I'm not going to say where it is, but since 2019. And to date, he has had 24 outages since 2019. And he's kept track. He's got it on a website. He's kept track that his lights have been out since 2019 for 168 hours. That's 7 days and 3 minutes. Wow. That doesn't obviously live in the urban area, but that being said, 7 days, and I will bet you, and I'm sure Paul, if he's keeping track of this, will tell me that those 7 days of electricity haven't come off his bill. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. The open hour continues after the break. All right, welcome back. The open hour continues very quickly before we go back to the telephone lines. I had mentioned earlier in the show off the top today that the province was having a news conference this morning, and they were going to crack down on illegal cannabis sales. Well, the release has just hit my desk, so I'm going to read part of it to you. It says, the province is taking more aggressive steps to address the growing public health and safety risks posed by illegal cannabis. Today, Scott Armstrong, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, directed all police agencies in the province to intensify enforcement aimed at stalking illegal cannabis operations and to report back on their activities. The release goes on to say the cannabis is legal in Canada, but only when sold through a regulated system. In Nova Scotia, the Cannabis Control Act designates the Nova Scotia Liquor Corp, NSLC, the exclusive legal retailer of recreational cannabis, ensuring that young people are safe, the products are tested and traceable, and crime is not involved in the supply chain. The release says a recent provincial review found at least 118 illegal outlets operating across Nova Scotia, compared with 51 legal NSLC stores. Illegal dispensaries and their staff and products are not subject to oversight, training, or testing, presenting significant risk to public health and creating opportunities for organized crime, money laundering, and even human trafficking. Our newsroom is monitoring the news conference, so stay tuned. We'll get some more details on that. But that is what the big announcement on cannabis today was. I wonder why now. Why all of a sudden, on the 4th of December of 2025, that it's time to crack down when cannabis has been legal for many years here. Anyway, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255 to the phones, and welcome Carlos to the show. Carlos, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm well. What's on your mind, sir?
Good. So to deal with this high cost of living, I think clearly the increasing the minimum wage is going to go just so far, right? To $16 an hour. We all know it's not enough. And at the same time, if we increase too fast, we also all know that it's going to pass on to the consumers and might actually even lead to unemployment, because some of the small business groups are not going to be able to pay for that. A better option perhaps would be to increase the exemption of the basic personal income. I was looking at this, and we are now at 11,481. The province, the premier, said that he would increase for 270. Okay, comparing to Alberta, for instance, Alberta is at 22,000 or something, 23,000. So that's half of Alberta that people that can keep in the pockets. I know that Alberta has oil; they can do that, but if it's able to have an increase of at least 1,000, going to 13,000, right? The basic personal income exemption. That's your money, like right there, to help on the food to those living at the bottom, right? And I always like the idea of leaving money to at that level there, because low-income individual, are they going to invest on the stock market? Probably not. Are they going to buy shares from Tesla? Probably not. They'll buy a new microwave, a new fridge, maybe have a second look on a heat pump, maybe take his wife and kids for dinner, like downtown. So letting low-income individuals or families to keep their money, it's always good at the local level, especially in these times of like Trump war, economic war on Earth. It's good to try to get those at the bottom level to be able to consume a bit more. That should alleviate a little bit the high cost of living. You just mentioned about the Nova Scotia liquor, and I always find fascinating that the province is in the business of selling liquor, is in the business of selling the cannabis, but it should be in the business of selling food. We need, just like New York is planning to go ahead, we need some sort of a government-owned food store. And why not, as I have said, actually, like before this, why not use the infrastructure of Nova Scotia liquor store to offer some basic food staple? Nothing fancy, but just enough so people can have a second option there without being worried about the marginal profit that like Loblaw needs to have, right? And anyway, but that's just my view.
All right, Carlos. Thank you, sir.
Madam. Thank you.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. It's $17 an hour. By the end of next October, that minimum wage will be. The exemption, that's an interesting go. I wonder how much extra that puts in your pocket at the end of the day. Even if we double it, I wonder if that is enough to put Nova Scotians over that affordability hump. And Alberta, yeah, of course, they have oil, and they also only have 5% GST in that province. We got, what is it up to now? 14% here, and we just lost a percentage point in Nova Scotia. Might be something to look at. That's on everything you buy, or almost everything you buy. Anyway, let's head back to the phones, and we welcome, where are we here? Brian. Brian, how are you?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Good. What's on your mind?
Reason I'm calling is because you mentioned the other day about competition for Nova Scotia Power.
Yeah.
We are the competition for Nova Scotia Power.
I don't understand.
I'm the one who lives off grid.
Well, fair enough. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
I drive by so many houses with solar panels. They have more solar panels on their roof than I have in my backyard.
Right, and a lot of them are selling their power back to the grid.
Not anymore. That's grandfathered. They gave that up years ago.
Okay, so now you just have to keep your own, right? Is that the way it works?
No, you're giving it to them. You're only using a quarter of the power you're bringing in, and you're giving 3/4 to Nova Scotia Power for free.
Really?
To the best of my knowledge. Here's the kicker. If you put 3 batteries in your house, 15 kilowatts, you could comfortably shut off Nova Scotia Power for 5 months of the year and not even think about it. I don't understand why all these people are giving power away.
That's news to me, Brian, and I'm not in the solar game, so I don't know. Maybe somebody out there can better clarify me. But if that's the case, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So here, I'm sure there's grandfather people, and you get paid for your power you put on the grid, but they stopped that years ago.
Huh.
From the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
But I try to convince all my friends who have it. It's like, get 3 batteries. Put it in your shed. You're allowed to now. You're allowed to put it in your house and demand an on and off switch. So when May hits, you turn off Nova Scotia Power, and you can live comfortably for 4 months on that solar power.
That's an interesting proposition. How much are the batteries, Brenda? Are they expensive?
They are expensive. They're $2,000 for a nice high-end battery. It's $2,000 for 5 kilowatts. But in Nova Scotia Efficiency, they offer a rebate for a certain brand, and that's the brand I have.
Okay. So a $6,000 layout. Let's just say you can, and then you can save your own power, and I would imagine over time, then it pays for itself, right?
Oh, easy.
Okay.
But here's the kicker: you're not allowed to switch off Nova Scotia Power.
I know. It's the catch-22 of all time, isn't it?
Isn't it? In the States, you are. In the States, you're allowed to have your own storage, and then you can turn off the grid, and then later on, when you want it, you can turn on the grid. But here, you're not allowed to. So I don't understand why people have $40,000 loans, but yet they're giving 3/4 of their power to Nova Scotia Power.
Great points, Brian. I appreciate it, sir.
All right, thank you.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I have absolutely no idea how the solar systems work and how that electricity system sets up. So if somebody out there can agree with Brian or not, that's part of the open hour. Let's keep the lines open. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I don't understand why you would. I don't understand why you would. I mean, you're going to save money on the stuff that you don't purchase, but to give most of it away, if Brian's correct, that would be bizarre to me. Not to suggest he's wrong, because as I said, I have no idea how the system works, but that just wouldn't be very appetizing for me if I was a homeowner and was going to put solar panels on. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The open hour continues after the news. All right, welcome back. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. It's the open hour. Lines are open, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Normal rules apply, folks. You can bring anything to the table. We'll have a conversation on it. Again, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. We had a caller a couple of calls ago was telling us about solar panels, and as I mentioned earlier, I don't have any idea how the solar panel system works because I don't have any myself. But I did get an email from Stephen who writes, regarding that last caller, the way the solar panels work is that we do not give the excess power to Nova Scotia Power. We get credits for power we don't use over the warmer months, and the credit is then put towards the power that we use over the winter months. I hope this helps. Stephen, thanks for the email. I'm not sure how long you've been with the solar panels, and our last caller, and his name escapes me, said that there are some people that are grandfathered into that, but he is under the belief that it doesn't exist anymore. And again, I'm at a loss. So maybe we'll dig a little bit deeper into this. And Vanessa's looking at me through the glass. Maybe we'll get somebody on from the regulator to determine exactly how it works and what the case is. Because if our first caller is correct, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to be generating power and only using one third of it, I think he said, and the other 2/3 going to Nova Scotia Power for free. That doesn't that wouldn't wash with me, and I imagine many of you. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We welcome Rick to the show. Rick, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
I was hoping to talk about the illicit cannabis and the crackdown on it throughout the province.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an individual that works throughout the province, and, I go to many areas, many communities throughout the province, and, I just want to highlight the increased cannabis and tobacco sales that are just taking place across this province. If you go through areas such as Millbrook, Codwell Road, Member 2, you will see, and I'm sure the residents of those areas will agree with me, the amount of illicit businesses opening and selling these products. Unfortunately, it is a huge issue, and I actually ran into a manager at an NSLC that sells the cannabis, and they told me a little bit ago that basically when they did a report, it wasn't an official report, but they did their own studies and determined that a lot of these products contain traces of feces and even, some, urine and animal matter in it. And it's just one of those things where, I feel as though we need to take action on this to ensure that products are safe and, safe for consumption, right? Fair
enough. Appreciate it, Rick.
Yeah. Yep, no worries.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The information that I have, and again, this is still kind of unfolding here, but information I have is there's 115 illegal dispensaries, according to the province's numbers across the province. They didn't, at least with the stuff I have. Maybe they said something else in the news conference. I don't know. I'm unable to listen to it, but I'm assuming that those are right across the province, and they did not break it down into the communities where those dispensaries are. But stay tuned here, and our newsroom is obviously working on the story, and we'll bring it to you when we get it. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's go to David. David, how are you?
Great. How are you this morning?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
Just a couple things changed the direction here this morning.
Sure.
The first thing is not part of my discussion, but just listen to that gentleman and you're about illegal dispensaries, 115. I don't know how they call them illegal when they're on native land. and they're selling cigarettes and cannabis. I don't know why they call that illegal. It's a strange term. Back to the meat. Back to Sylvain talking about prices and what they think.
Yep.
Yeah, and do you find, Dan, maybe it's just me, but and we're not picking on them. That's not where I'm going with this, but a little defensive on the big grocery stores. A little won't really come out and say, I hate the word gouge. Let's say high profit. Let's use that. You have CEOs and you have managers and you have general managers. I heard there's 2 managers to every worker at Sobeys and Superstore and so on and so forth. And you know that the companies that put the product on the shelf, Dan, pay what they call shelf fee. So it's not free. So they pay so much money to Sobeys to allow their product on the shelf. They have representatives from those companies that come in and make sure the shelf is full because they're paying Sobeys money. So I'm paying Dan, I'll just use this figure, $1,000 a month to have my vegetables on your end of your aisle with a big display. Okay, so the bigger the display, the bigger the square footage, we're going to call it, the more you're going to pay, the more I'm going to pay you. Then I'm going to have my representatives come in and make sure you're putting my product on the shelf and make sure you're advertising my product and make sure that I have enough in the back room. But that's an important part. A place like Gateway doesn't have that. Place like Gateway, that doesn't exist.
Right.
So there's one issue. Another issue is about saying that their meat might have the tag wrong or something. Watch CTV News on YouTube and watch CBC when they interview the owner, especially the owner in his truck, and he tells you exactly why they're cheaper. He buys by quantity.
Yep.
He buys huge number of trucks. So does Sobeys, Dan.
I know, and
Sobeys
I asked Sylvain that
Gateway.
question, right? I said, if that's the way that it works at Gateway, and they sell by volume. But I mean, my goodness, Empire Company and Loblaw are much larger than they should be able to pass those savings on to us if they're buying by volume, right?
And what was his answer?
He didn't really answer it.
Exactly.
Right.
Because he can't. Because he comes on your show. He can't, Dan. There's no. I mean, we've been beating our heads on the wall, you, Todd, for years, and it's getting worse now because it's. I'll use the dirty word, gouging is all it is. There's 40, and I don't work for Gateway. I don't have Gateway stickers on my vehicles. I just go there because as a family, we have to.
Right. And
it's a heck of a lot cheaper, and I'll drive there in a snowstorm before I'll go to the other 2 monopoly-owned, I'll call it, because that they want to have monopoly on everything. I won't go there to buy anything. So they have 40 butchers out there. They've expanded to their store, yes, but they also expanded behind to get more product in. And they're one location. Sobeys has I don't know how many. So I'll use the word bull because that's the only thing I can think of.
The part about it that I don't understand, David, and I agree with you. That I don't understand is I hear an awful lot when we talk about grocery stores and we talk about grocery store pricing, these thin margins that these grocery stores are having. Yet, when I look at financials every quarter from these big companies, and I know they're more than just grocery stores, but it's a big company, and if they're turning $215 million profit in a quarter on a even if, as Sylvain said, even if it is the pharmaceutical end of things, if it's their drugstores or whatever else, these are things that Nova Scotians and Canadians can't live without, right? It's not like it's a car, or it's not like it's an object that is, a nice to have. We have to eat, and we have to have medicines, and we have to be able to do this, and yet they're turning these huge profits every quarter and saying, well, our margins are thin.
Yeah, and we are believing it. It's like Rick Howe used to start a long time ago. You don't like the gas prices? Let's boycott. Let's get a bunch of signs and go stand in front of the Irving office or the ASO office. The only way you're going to do it is boycott. No one wants a boycott because we have to eat. Yeah. But yet, what stance can we take? We have to take a stance. There's something we have to do, Dan. There's something like listening to Sylvain. I understand. He's, that's what he does. But I'm going to use the word here. I think he's wrong. because I think I think the larger companies, like, are you telling me that in Gateway, Kingsway Market, Low Food, we'll use those two places. Are you telling me their cows come from a different place? Their chickens come from a different farm, and their pigs come from a different
same
pen?
meat, right?
It's all the same. I talked to a person at Gateway, and I say, gee, your chicken's $1.29 a pound, and Sobeys it's $4.49 unless it's out on the flyer on a flip app. Yeah, well, is your chicken like this? Like, what is their chicken fed golden food or something? Nope. We watch the truck. We buy it at the same farm. We watch the trucks like identical, same place. And you cannot tell me anything to do with they buy more chickens than what Sobeys buys. But there's no way, Dan, Gateway buys more chicken than 40 Sobeys stores. But no, Sobeys stores buy less and mark it up. That's what they do. And people just go in. I see it all the time when I go in and get a milk, because the only reason I go there, I go in there and buy a milk or a loaf of bread because I can't get milk and I can't get bread at Gateway. If I could, I wouldn't even buy it at Sobeys. But I go there and I watch people 2 bags of groceries for $100 and they have nothing.
Yep.
And you can tell me a guy can sit at his office making millions of dollars every year, Dan, sit at his office with his pen and tell me the profit margin isn't very high. And for Sylvain to say they make more money or it's better for them to sell clothing and pharmaceutical, Sobeys been in business, Dan, for, I'm guessing, 100 years.
Well over 100.
Are they just figuring it out now that we can make more money on clothing? No. Let's just keep gouging people, gouge, and we'll come up with all kinds of excuses.
David, I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Have a good day.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. And to say that that Nova Scotians are passionate about their grocery prices is a bit of an understatement, isn't it? It's something we need, right? Like we can't go elsewhere. We have to eat. And our last caller was referring to Gateway, which is an independent retailer, and that's fine. And if you have the ability to go to Gateway and do or the other, there's a bunch. There's 3 or 4 stores that do similar things to what Gateway does in HRM. But if you don't have the ability to get there easily or at all, you're stuck with what you have in your neighborhood, right? And our last caller, lots of points that I agree with. If volume is the way that we lower prices, how can you get more volume than the 2 biggest companies in Canada? 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's welcome Mike to the show. Mike, how are you?
Hi, how are you today?
Good. What's on your mind?
We're going back to the solar panel stuff.
Sure.
There's a company in Tatamagouche that makes solar deep cycle lead acid batteries. And my thing with the solar panel is, why put a solar panel on my house if the power goes out? It's no good to me. So I would like the ability to store some electricity so that at night I can use that electricity that I made in the day. But because the lead acid batteries and the newfangled battery,
lithium ion, yep.
Yeah, well, you can't have a big lithium ion battery for storage because it's a fire hazard.
Okay.
So you can put a Tesla in your garage, but you can't put a...
Can you put it outside, or does it get cold and not work?
I have no idea.
Right.
I can't answer that truthfully. But the government won't let you... They won't let you use lead acid solar batteries. I got friends that live off grid, and they put them on. They're not allowed to do that because the Nova Scotia government and NS Power doesn't want you not connected to the grid. But they've gone ahead and used, well, especially at their camp, right?
Right.
But legislation needs to change. And as far as I know, when you make a kilowatt of power, well, let's say you make 2 kilowatts, you use one and you're supposed to give it to the other one to Nova Scotia Power, but Nova Scotia Power is supposed to give that back to you, but I don't know if that's still even true or not. I got so frustrated trying to figure out how I can live off grid, more or less, that it's just headbanging.
I'll tell you what, Mike. I recall in the past, and I'm going deep into my memory archives, which are sketchy at best. But I remember having a conversation with somebody that installed these things in the past, and I will do my best to try and bring someone onto the show that works in the industry and knows the ins and outs, and see if we can get some answers for everybody.
I think it's great. I got solar hot water on my roof, and I got hot water all the time, and I don't have any issue with that. The only time I turn my electric hot water, it's hooked to a electric hot water tank as well, and the only time I turn that on is when I have to put. As long as I don't have to put cold water into my shower, it's off. So,
okay.
But I turn that off somewheres in May, and I turn that back on somewheres around the 1st of November.
Mike, I appreciate it, sir.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We welcome Tim to the show. Tim, how are you?
Not too bad. I'd say about 50 years ago, Loblaws and Sobeys stopped being grocers and became landlords who happened to be in the grocery business.
Right.
Every building, whether it be the superstore across the street from you, including the Burger King, I bet you Loblaws owns the whole shebang. Same with
you're probably right. I don't know for sure, but you're probably right.
But and they have all those doctors' offices and other offices, so they're making their money from rent. So as for groceries, well, everything's getting expensive. I mean, even for the farmers, the gas, the fuel, the feed. Everything is just getting expensive.
Right.
What do we do about it? Who knows? You do your best. As for Gateway, I go Gateway. I find, they're not the top. They're not the top rating of meats. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but if you're just looking for protein, and it's cheap, right?
Yeah, it's fine for that. But don't go there expecting, a fabulous T-bone or ribeye roast or whatever. It's because it's just not there. So the quality,
okay.
You have to pay for the quality, I guess.
All right,
anyways,
Tim, thank you.
Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Last word today goes to Luke. Luke, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good. You have some information on solar batteries for me.
Yeah, I just heard a prior caller mentioning about the dangers of lithium-ion indoors. Powerwall 3, which is a Tesla product, is compatible with being used outdoors, so it can be installed outdoors.
It doesn't get frozen and lose capacity?
It's rated down to minus 20.
Okay.
So I don't know if they're doing that with built-in heating, which would obviously take a hit on battery life. But it's very similar to how their cars operate.
So they offer a home storage battery as well.
Yeah, Tesla Powerwall. So their third generation of it is now rated for outdoor use in Canada. The prior models weren't. They had to be installed indoors. Okay. And there's a few other manufacturers that are making outdoor-rated stuff for Canada as well. So a little less danger having those stored inside, especially if you have multiple batteries.
Luke, I appreciate it, sir.
No problem.
Have a good one. I have often said, and it goes all the way back to the fella who this studio is named after, and that, of course, being Rick Howe, is that we have some of the most educated listeners out there that are willing to share their information. I know nothing about solar generation. I know how it works, but I don't know how the practicalities of the whole thing are. And there are many of you out there that are using it, many of you that have gone through the bureaucratic red tape to do this, and I think it's worth having a discussion. If we're going to continue to deal with a monopoly that is Nova Scotia Power, I know that many of you that can or have the ability to are probably looking at alternative sources. I had an emailer that wrote, if I'm going to spend all of those thousands of dollars on solar batteries to keep my lights on when Nova Scotia Power inevitably goes out, it would be cheaper for me to buy a generator and plug it into my house. And I would imagine in the short term, you're correct. But then there's the generator's cost and the fuel and all of that stuff that's associated with it as well. Thanks to each and every one of you that took the time out of your busy days to dial the numbers and join the program. I truly appreciate it. I learn something every day here on the program. I know people say, oh, you just say that. But it's the truth. I really do. And I look forward to these conversations every day as we go through the open hour. And we will do it tomorrow. The Friday Free-for-All goes at 11 o'clock tomorrow. So make sure that you're by your phone. And we're looking forward to those conversations as well. We're going to take a break here, get an update on the news, and when we come back, did the Premier encourage the use of the notwithstanding clause in other jurisdictions? A conversation with Vince Calderhead from Pink Larkin Law. When we come back, you're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Back in minutes. Welcome back. There's been a lot of discussion as of late and a number of instances as of late where the infamous notwithstanding clause has been used. The most recent one, at least in my recollection, is the notwithstanding clause being used, or at least threatened to be used, in Alberta. And we, of course, have seen it in other jurisdictions across the country. And our next guest has authored a opinion piece that appeared in the Chronicle Herald, calling out for the Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, along with a couple of other Canadian premiers who signed an open letter that called on the feds to withdraw its written submissions in an upcoming Supreme Court of Canada case involving Quebec's use of the notwithstanding clause. Very pleased to welcome to the show the author of that opinion piece from Pink Larkin Law, Vince Calderhead. Vince, how are you?
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Vince, I guess when you watch the coverage of the notwithstanding clause when it inevitably comes up in a debate over something at a provincial level or at the feds, this clause wasn't meant to be bantered about as much as it is. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, since the charter came into force in 1982. There have been historically were very, very, very few attempts by governments and no attempt by the federal government, but very few attempts to override fundamental charter rights. And it's really just in the past few years that some governments are starting to do it, and it's obviously profoundly troubling.
Tell me a little bit about this open letter that has the signature of Premier Houston and others at that same level on it.
Yeah, and this was something that kind of slipped away from any media scrutiny or any real media scrutiny, particularly locally at the time. So back in October, several premiers, including Premier Houston, signed a letter which they sent to the federal government saying, we need you, we insist and demand that you withdraw your position, your written position called a factum, at an upcoming Supreme Court of Canada appeal, saying we want you to withdraw that. And so you say, well, what was so troubling about the federal government's position? And this was on the Quebec secularism case. And the federal government, in fact, had not weighed in on the secularism debate per se, hadn't taken any position, had not even complained about the province relying on the notwithstanding clause. The only thing they had said was that when a government uses the notwithstanding clause, people should still be able to go to court and say, in fact, and ask the court to declare whether or not, in fact, their rights have been violated. And this would not prevent this would not strike down a law, but it would nonetheless be a crucially important judicial declaration that rights had been violated. And you may say, well, that's kind of a nuance or a subtle thing. No, it's actually profoundly important for people to know whether their constitutional, their basic human rights have been violated. And these include stuff like freedom of religion, freedom of expression, right of workers to organize, to unionize, right of workers to strike, and also the equality rights, the non-discrimination rights in the Charter. All of these can be overridden by a provincial government that has a legislative majority. So to think that a government might do this is profoundly troubling.
Vince, is there a test of this? And the reason I ask that is if a government decides that it's going to use this notwithstanding clause, is there a legal test that has to happen before it can be invoked?
Nope.
Really?
Nope. A legislative majority is enough if they pass a law that says our overriding of those rights will happen notwithstanding the protection in the Charter, then that law will supersede those human rights protections for up to 5 years at a go. And that's that. And as if that weren't bad enough, this recent letter that the Premier signed on to says, and by the way, we don't want courts to have any ability to rule on whether this law that we've passed, this notwithstanding law we've passed, violates charter rights. So a government can pass such a law even in the absence of any charter ruling. You can say, look, we're afraid that what we have in mind here might be struck down by the charter, by the courts using the charter, and so we'll pass this law. But what's really important to understand, and hopefully the Supreme Court of Canada will uphold this principle and rule against the position that Premier Houston has adopted, is to say, well, when a government chooses to do that, and it needs to be very, very rare. I mean, basic human rights are what Canadians, how they identify. The Charter is one of the most important symbols of Canadian identity. All the polls have said that for decades. And hopefully the court will make clear that when a government uses the notwithstanding clause, Canadians will still be able to go to court and say, well, has this law violated my rights? And why is that important? Well, Canadians need to know what their government has done on the issue of fundamental rights, human rights. Canadians and Nova Scotians, next time they have an election after such a law is passed, they should be entitled to know, well, has my government respected basic human rights or not? And allowing a court to pass those kind of declaratory judgments is crucially important voter information.
If this is successful, would that even limit the Supreme Court's ability to rule on these?
Yeah, and so that in a way that's the real important question, is whether if these premiers who have signed on to this letter are successful in their submissions, they would say that by invoking the notwithstanding clause, that doesn't even permit a court to rule or to make a declaration that rights have been violated. The door to the courts would be barred from any kind of application like that. So that's profoundly troubling. But we'll find out. And at this point, some courts have already ruled that when a province invokes the notwithstanding clause, that citizens still have the right to go to court and to get a ruling on whether their rights have been violated. Even though the law will remain in place, nonetheless, it's fundamentally important for Nova Scotians when they come next time, for example, to the voting place, to know, should I elect or re-elect a government that has just overridden fundamental human rights? I mean, history, unfortunately, has many examples of how legislatures have overridden, legislative majorities have overridden minorities' fundamental rights. And we want to prevent that kind of Canada from happening.
Vince, I appreciate your time, sir.
Okay, thanks for having me on.
That is Vince Calderhead. He's from Pink Larkin Law. That is sobering, isn't it? It makes you wonder if this is even in the spirit of what the people that authored the Constitution and the notwithstanding clause had in mind. That the provincial government that has a legislative majority can invoke a notwithstanding clause, I don't know, say on a teacher's strike. And there's no recourse for the teachers, the union, anybody that's involved with it. Stopping to take a break here. When we come back, I promised we'd have a discussion about the future fighter jet for Canada. Scott Taylor from Esprit de Corps Magazine will be joining us. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in minutes. I liken it to a discussion that a family has when they're talking about getting a new car. And I know that's pretty simplistic when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar fighter jet, and you're talking about the political climate that we're in as well. But it seems that there are people that are on one side or the other when it comes to the F-35 or this Saab jet from Sweden. So our next guest is more plugged into this stuff than I am and probably knows a lot more about fighter jets than he probably cares to admit. And that is Scott Taylor from Esprit de Corps Magazine. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. It's really interesting to watch this debate over these two potentials for the replacement for the CF-18 unfold, because I'm getting it here on the show.
Well, we get any article that we do or video, we get tons of comments, everybody back and forth. Everybody has an opinion on it, but it's one of those things where for the Air Force brass, this will be like the fifth time that they've had to put out a brush fire. Like they thought they were getting the F-35s. It was announced, I think it was 2010 under the Harper government. They would be buying 65 of them, and it was all sort of set. And then they had to push the reset button, and then the Liberals campaigned saying they would buy any plane but the F-35. And then the Air Force kept coming back and put it in the competition, and then it won. Lo and behold, it won, and now we're back to with the Trump and his tariff war, people saying, well, maybe we should be spending our money somewhere else. Maybe we should relook at that deal. And so, I mean, it's this thing that's just like a forest fire that keeps reigniting. They can't put it out. And since the outset, the F-35 has been the one and only aircraft that the brass want. But the political climate has changed quite a bit.
So is there a definitive answer to the question I'm sure you get, and I know I get on these things, is one, the F-35 better than the Gripen, or is it up to each individual pilot? I mean, what's the difference?
Well, they do two different jobs. I mean, one is it's a strike aircraft. The F-35 it's got stealth. It's meant to be flown in day one to take out a peer or a near peer's air defenses to allow for a subsequent campaign, which is a very specific role. And again, I can never foresee any scenario where in Canada would undertake that alone. So the fact that we would have all of our aircraft, you're putting one tool in the toolbox. We've always advocated for a mixed fleet, and the Gripen is actually meant for like an Arctic interceptor. The Swedes made it. They of course border Russia, and they have Russians in their airspace. So this is something which was designed and is meant to be exactly what we would have the reason for it would be to protect Canada's airspace. So this idea that the Gripen can now come back in and this what they're floating it. They're sending over the King of Sweden, who's on a charm offensive for signing defense pacts last month. They're talking about bringing 6,000 jobs and assembling the Gripens in Canada. Like, they are really sweetening the pot. And on the flip side, you've got Donald Trump and his ambassador, Pete Hoekstra, basically bullying Canada, saying you're going to take this or else. So I think things are changing. And the fact that there's so many benefits to the Gripen, it's a much cheaper aircraft to operate, and it's much more available because it's much easier to fix. The F-35 is as we've seen so far, a very finicky beast. It's got more capability, but at the same time, it takes a lot more maintenance, and its availability rate is far lower than that of the Gripen. So it's not a case of comparing an apple to an orange. It's about them both being two separate pieces of fruit, and quite often a mix is what you would prefer anyway.
And Canada's military procurement system in the middle of that, and everybody's scratching their head now.
Well, this is it. I mean, then people are saying, well, we've got the jobs already in place for the F-35 as part of the bigger fleet worldwide. And then we've already heard from Donald Trump that he wants those jobs brought back the minute the contract expires. So those aren't even a sure bet, whereas Gripen, or the Saab Gripen people, are saying we will put 6,000 aviation jobs into Canada for the next 40 years. And then, this is just the games that are being played. Like even last week, there was the competition results that were done in 2021 between the Gripen and the F-35. Those results were leaked out to the CBC and Radio Canada. And that, of course, for the people that are pro F-35, it put the nail in the coffin. They said, look, it's a better aircraft. Let's get the best for Canada. And everyone says, yeah, okay. But it was the Air Force brass that drafted the criteria by which that competition was held. And they have always wanted the F-35 from the outset. So if you basically describe an F-35 as the ideal aircraft, the Gripen's not going to score as well. So, I mean, even that was been skewered. And as people have pointed out, the Gripen model has evolved since that competition was held. And yeah, it's been interesting to watch how people go back and forth on this, each with an idea. And the fact that people saying we can't operate a mixed fleet, that was coming from the American ambassador. Up until now, we've always operated a mixed fleet. We've had F-104s in the skies alongside the F-18, alongside the F-5. We've had 3 different fighter aircraft just when I was doing my service back in the 80s. So, of course we can. And we maintained many more aircraft in those days than we have currently. So the idea that we can't, Australia is a smaller country, smaller Air Force, but they have a mixed fleet. Like these ideas that these things that you just can't have that. Why can't we? We always did. So the more time is spent on this debate, the more scrutiny that goes into the arguments that are being made. And I think there's more chance for them to actually pull the trigger and cancel the rest of those F-35s and go with the Gripen as a mixed fleet.
Scott, you mentioned that the Air Force brass have been in the F-35 camp from the outset. Or do you think that the Air Force's role now is going to change because of the political tensions with the United States and this focus more on Arctic sovereignty? The Prime Minister's been up there a couple of times and buying missile launchers, and he's promising new bases and those kind of things.
Well, he's also said that America is no longer a trusted partner, and we've got to move away from this near entirely dependency on American weapon systems, because that's something which that they can't be trusted. So if we're going to make that pledge and we can follow it, then we probably should look at buying from a European country, as we are trying to diversify in that direction. So let's hope we do.
Is there any kind of timeline on when a decision has to be made? I know we're already somewhat into the F-35 contract, aren't we?
Well, I think the Air Force brass believe that they can play this out, and they're going to get more concessions from Lockheed Martin. If they do, just by making it an actual viable possibility that we would go a different route, that they could come back and Lockheed Martin could sweeten the deal by saying those jobs are permanent, we won't bring them back. But when you've got President Donald Trump doing things on a whim, and he wants those jobs back, like the Lockheed Martin can't make promises that they can't cash. So it's interesting to see, because the Air Force, I mean, they don't want this debate to keep going, because as people start digging into it, as I said, the more they become familiar with it, the more they realize that there are 2 separate roles for these 2 different aircraft, and one of them, defending Canada's skies on the Arctic, is perfectly suited to the Gripen, and it's far more, operationally available than the F-35, which is a very fickle aircraft.
Are we in danger with having this debate going back and forth of this going down? What was it, the UH-101 helicopter that went between governments and then ended up getting canceled and setting us back all those years?
And then they did, in fact, end up buying the Cormorant. It's like, in the end of the day, the Air Force is basically recalcitrant. They will not accept anything. They just keep going. I mean, they're bullheaded. This F-35 thing started, it was 21 years ago, I think, that they started it. So even that, the evolution of an aircraft, what was, cutting edge 21 years ago is no longer the same cutting edge argument you can use today. Yes, the different types have evolved and the different blocks have evolved, but it's, they're moving into 6th generation aircraft now, and we're still talking about 5th generation on the F-35 as if it's the cat's pajamas. So the timelines are crazy. I mean, if you look at World War II, we started off flying biplanes and we ended up flying jets in 6 years. Now we're looking at keeping an aircraft in the sky for the next 50 when everybody can see from the war in Ukraine that unmanned is the way everyone's going, these unmanned drones. Manned fighter jets are going to be a thing of the past.
I mean, they're so bloody expensive, and you can buy a lot of drones for what one F-35 would cost.
You can buy a boatload of drones for what it costs, and they can shoot down an F-35 with a drone. I mean, so that's where we're going. So, and the same with, I hate to say it, but like capital warships, if you're watching the Black Sea Fleet, they're being taken down one by one by Ukrainian drone boats. And here we are building the new destroyers and putting all our money in Canada's future into manned warships. So it'll be interesting.
Scott Taylor, appreciate it, sir.
Have a great weekend. Take care.
That is Scott Taylor. He's from Esprit de Corps Magazine. The opinion piece, by the way, was in the Herald a couple days ago. It's called Future Fighter Debate Takes Off, if you want to read it for yourself. When we come back, speaking of ships in the Halifax Harbor, somber anniversary is coming up this weekend. Of course, we will pause and remember the after effects of the Halifax explosion on Saturday, and to give us a little perspective of what happened and where or how far we've come since. A conversation with our friend and historian Blair Beed when we come back right after the news. Welcome back. As we carry on here on the Thursday, or as we like to call it, the Friday Eve edition of the program. I mentioned off the top of the show that we're into a deep freeze for the next couple of days, but it looks like things will start to improve and warm up a little bit for the weekend, and that's good news for those that are planning to go up to Fort Needham and take in the commemoration ceremony of a very tragic event that happened in our harbor on the 6th of December of 1917. That, of course, everybody knows the story, when SS Mont Blanc collided with the SS Imo and launched a huge explosion that claimed the lives of well over 1,000 people here, and, of course, created all kinds of other injuries, blindness, and has lived on in infamy in our lore of this city ever since. Very pleased to welcome into the show today to give us a little bit of perspective of the Halifax explosion our friend and historian, that's Blair Beed. I almost said it wrong again, Blair. I'm sorry.
No problem.
How are you?
Well, like half the city, I have a bit of a cold.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's certainly going around, right? It's not the Spanish flu, I hope.
No, and it's funny you mentioned about the death toll of the explosion. Of course, some of those people that died of the explosion injuries died because of the Spanish flu. They were already weak.
Right, because it was hitting
the Spanish
city
flu came along
right at the same time, and there was a lot going on in Halifax Harbor on the day that those two ships collided, and we saw the explosion in 1917.
Oh, it was like a highway. It was like rush hour traffic because it was wartime. So there was all kinds of vessels, and you just have to cast your mind back that there were still sailing schooners and things in the harbor. So a lot of vessels. So a lot of coming and going to confuse the issue of what actually happened.
The explosion was so intense, Blair, that and I'm sitting here in the north end of Halifax at Yonge and Roby, and I'm looking over the north end. That explosion happened near the Narrows in the harbor, and the shockwave from the explosion wiped out a good chunk of what I'm looking at right now.
Yes, it knocked in the houses, and as they were heated by coal-burning stoves, the fire burned on that hill down to the harbor for 12 days.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time.
It's a long time. And then, of course, like dominoes, windows and doors and things just shattered throughout the city.
And then in the immediate aftermath of the explosion, Blair, I understand that the temperature plummeted and it got really cold.
And people had actually gone to work that day saying it was like an Indian summer day, and some people didn't even bother taking their top coats or their mittens or things because it was such a nice morning. But yes, it turned into a blizzard and lasted and buried people in the ruins who may have survived except they froze to death.
Now, there's been a lot of, obviously, discussion and investigation into this explosion. Do we know definitively what happened and what led to it?
We know that it was the EMO and the Mont Blanc confused signaling to which way they should have gone, and the Mont Blanc crossed the bow of a ship, which the U.S. Navy used to teach as an example of don't do that with your ship afterwards. And so we know it was the collision. They still don't really know what ignited the explosion. Was it the stove on board the ship itself that turned over and caught fire? Was it the grating metal as the two ships parted? Was it just simply sort of like a lighter with a flick and the collision that caused the fire that then caused the explosion? And of course there were rumors, that it was a sabotage and all those things, but basically it was just human error.
And the ships were obviously laden for war, so that contributed to the magnitude of the explosion.
Well, the Mont Blanc had 2,000 tons of wet and dry picric acid, 200 tons of TNT, 60 tons of explosive gun cotton, and barrels of benzol. So it was a floating bomb. The EMO was on its way to New York to get relief supplies for the people of Belgium, so it didn't have a cargo, so it's riding higher. So that really made that bow like a blade to slice into the side of the Mont Blanc.
1,782 people lost their lives, but Blair, the lasting legacy of that was the thousands upon thousands more that were injured.
The injured, and also there's newspaper obituaries as far as I've seen is 1923 that listed in the obituary died of their injuries from the explosion. People who became bedridden and never got up again. So the explosion had long-term effects. And when I was growing up as a kid, you would see people with the scars in their faces from, the flying glass and debris. So it has been a long-lasting, big story of the city.
And those stories continue. I've heard Halifax Explosion, and the aftermath of which was responsible for creating the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, correct?
Yes, and we had a school for the blind in the city at the time, and the principal of the school was a guy named Sir Frederick Fraser, and he was known as the Blind Knight because he was actually blind himself. And they had to come up quickly about what do you do with these people that now need new occupations and new directions and things. And because of that, yes, the CNIB became part of now Canadian society's help to people.
The North End rebuilt, of course, and the other areas. There was a Mi'kmaq village that was at Tufts Cove, where the generating station is, or near where the generating station is now, was wiped out. We saw debris scattered. We saw an anchor in Dartmouth. That didn't happen overnight, and there was quite an effort to get people housed in the aftermath of the explosion.
There was, and by the way, the anchor is out in the Northwest Arm. It's the cannon that's over in Dartmouth.
Right, the cannon. My mistake.
The cannon, where they'll have a ceremony on Saturday at 11 o'clock by the cannon for the Dartmouth side people. But housing people, they put them in church halls and theaters and hallways of buildings, and then they did temporary housing, which shows it can be done if you really need to do it, and then they did more temporary housing, and then finally we have the icon of the rebuilding known as the Hydrostone.
Right, and I'm looking out the window at it right now. We commemorate this service, and rightly so, this event every year with a service that goes on Saturday at 9 at Fort Needham.
Yes, and then at 10 on Lady Hammond Road, the fire department remembers the men of the fire department who died in the explosion, and of course the firemen who survived had to then fight those fires. So you can go, if you're not an early bird person, for the one on Fort Needham, you could go to the one at the monument at Lady Hammond Road. And
history tells us, Blair, that without the effort of a telegraph operator down on the waterfront in the event of this explosion, it could have been much worse.
Well, Vincent Coleman warned a train with hundreds of people on it, and the train did stop. Another person ran along the railway line, probably from the energy you get from something like that, and they sent the word out, no time to explain, casualties enormous, send help to Halifax. Otherwise, the world wouldn't have known about it right away. But within 2 hours, the governor of Massachusetts even knew that there had been something really bad in Halifax.
And sent help immediately, and we, of course, send our thanks every year in the form of a tree to Massachusetts, to Boston.
We do, and I'm in tourism, and I do meet people who say they're from Massachusetts and Boston, and they do. It is a recognized event. It's really told them what they did every year.
Blair, I know you're a little under the weather, and I appreciate you spending some time with us. I hope you feel better soon.
Thanks very much.
That is Blair Beed. He's our resident historian here on the show. He's been joining us for many years moving forward. So if you're curious and you want to go to the city's Explosion Memorial Service, it's the 108th memorial service for the Halifax Explosion. It takes place on a Saturday morning, begins at 9 o'clock up at Fort Needham Memorial Park. There'll be the master of ceremonies there will be District 8 Councillor Virginia Hinch, and they'll go through the program. There's a moment of silence, there's O Canada, those remarks, and so on and so forth. But I've been to it. We are fortunate that we're very close here at the radio station to go to Fort Needham for the event, and it really is it's important, and it really drives home the enormity of what that explosion was and what it did to our community and to all those thousands of people. I read a story about a factory that used to be in the backyard here at the radio station where Percy's was, that it literally blew the windows out of it. And then one of the floors collapsed onto the other. That's the extent. And look how far off of the harbor and the geography that is between here, which is essentially Roby Street, and the Narrows. There's that big hill which would help to deflect some of the concussion from the explosion up, but it still was just an absolute wipeout of the North End. And as Blair said, the Hydrostone was born as a result of it. Again, 9 o'clock on Saturday morning at Fort Needham Park. Another break here on the program, and when we come back, change things up a little bit. We'll lighten up the mood, so to speak. The Project FeederWatch is returning for its 39th season. We'll tell you what it's all about and what you can do to participate with our friends from Birds Canada. Community engagement specialist Olivia Carvalho will be our guest. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Allstrands. Back in a minute. Oh my goodness, we were talking about the weather, and the skies have opened up in downtown Halifax. It's pouring rain right now, so if you're out and about, don't forget to put the raincoat on or grab the umbrella, although it's a little breezy. I don't know if the umbrella will do much for you, but it's pouring right now. And I was just in the newsroom very quickly before we get to our next guest, and apparently Nova Scotia Power has now opened its emergency operations center. There's some more weather that's coming into not necessarily for Halifax. They wouldn't open it for this, but there's some weather that's moving into the northeast part of the province and into Cape Breton. So I would imagine this is part of that, but because of our location being very close to the water again, looks like it's going to be rain here. I don't see any warnings or here for our part of the world, but there are snow squall warnings that are happening up in the northern parts of Cape Breton and in the traditional areas where those squalls happen. So if you're heading up there, perhaps planning to head up there for the weekend, you might want to keep an eye on the road conditions as this weather continues to move its way through. Birds Canada has announced the return for a 39th season of a program that's called Project FeederWatch. What exactly is it? What does it entail? What's it used for? I'm very pleased to welcome to the program Community Engagement Specialist for Birds Canada, and that's Olivia Carvalho. Olivia, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
I guess let's start with what exactly is Birds Canada and what is it that you do?
Yeah, so Birds Canada is a national conservation and science organization based out of Long Point, Ontario. But we have lovely folks across the country who make our work go round, so to speak. And we've been around for quite a long time. And like I said, spread nationally. So now a lot of our focus is not only on conservation, but getting people at home involved in the conservation strategies across the country. And part of that is with community monitoring programs like Project FeederWatch.
So tell me a little bit about Project FeederWatch and what's its goal? What's it designed to do?
Absolutely. So Project FeederWatch is one of the oldest bird monitoring programs in the world, and it runs November through April every year. And as you mentioned, this is the 39th year that folks will count the birds that visit their backyards, their nature centers, community areas, or really anywhere that they can view birds to count them during the winter months. And what's special about Project FeederWatch is it gives us a really detailed idea of where our birds are in the winter months and how they're doing, population and abundance data. But it helps paint a really detailed picture of a time of year where birds aren't on the move. We're looking at our resident winter birds.
Yeah, and living near a marsh, I can tell you that they're still there, and they're as noisy as they are in the spring.
Absolutely, yes. It's an active time of year, which I think really surprises people at how many birds will kind of be around, because it does seem quiet because birds aren't on the move, but there's lots to explore.
And the reason I say that is that there's a family of blue jays that have inhabited the woods out in front of my bedroom window, and they will certainly tell you that they're there.
Well, lucky you. Lucky you.
So I guess, Olivia, do you need to identify the bird? Do you need to take pictures of it? How does the survey work?
Right. So it's an observation-based survey. So you're counting the birds that you see visiting your count site. So when people sign up for Project FeederWatch, they have to put in where they're counting from. So that gives us location data. And then they're only counting the birds that visit their site during their count period. And the count happens over 2 days. So for me, I like to do it Friday at lunch, and then I do it again on Saturday mornings. But you can do it any day of the week. But we ask that you don't do your count more than once per week. So leave 5 days between your 2 count period days. And in that time, you can count for as little as 15 minutes. I often, on a lunch hour, it's going to be a little shorter for me, but on a weekend day, easier to spend a full hour or more. And you're counting the birds that visit your site and keeping track of those in the FeederWatch app. That's really it. You're just, identifying that the birds that visit your count site.
Do we need to identify what kind of bird it is, or just that it's a bird?
Oh, you're identifying the individual species, and we've got lots of resources. So if you're not someone that's super familiar with your birds, winter's a really great time to learn, because the amount of species that are around, in your own backyard, you probably have about 15, no more than 20 species this time of year. So it's really easy to get familiar with them. And like I said, we've got great resources, and there's a great team at Birds Canada to help you with any tricky IDs as well.
There's all kinds of wonderful tools out there to identify birds these days.
Absolutely, yes. We encourage folks to use the Merlin Bird ID app, and there's some great websites online as well as the FeederWatch.org site has so many pages for tricky bird IDs and learning your sparrows and anything that's going to kind of help you prepare. We actually designed an intro course to winter birds on our Birds Canada site, so anyone can go on and take that free course to prepare for FeederWatch.
People often tell me that there's not a lot to do in the wintertime, right? They're at home and they're stuck in, and the weather may not be the best, but you can still keep an eye on that site and help you folks out at Birds Canada by keeping track of the birds that visit you.
That's right. And honestly, it's become such a winter ritual for me. I really look forward to that quiet moment, but also, getting to know the birds in my neighborhood and seeing how they interact with each other and how they interact with my feeder. Participants tell us all the time they love, spending their weekends with their grandkids, counting the birds, or this is a way for them to connect with other birds in their area, and they go to a park to count together. There's lots of different ways to FeederWatch, but it does really give a moment in the week where we can not only be still, but really tune into what's happening around us.
What do Birds Canada use the data for? Is it for research? How does that work?
FeederWatch data is collected across North America. So Birds Canada is the coordinator of this program in Canada, and our friends at the Cornell Lab oversee feeder watchers in the States. And what's really cool about this data is we have total North America coverage then, Canada and US. And this data has been used for lots of different scientific publications, studies of individual species. We've seen changes in distribution, like the Eurasian collared dove used to be quite eastern, has moved west in the last number of years. And Project FeederWatch data helps us actually see where birds are and how they're doing. So really important data for us at a time of year where not a lot of other monitoring is happening.
If I want to take part, or somebody out there listening wants to take part, Olivia, how do we do that?
You go to birdscanada.org/PFW. That's Project FeederWatch.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing the results. Olivia, appreciate your time.
Happy birding. Thanks very much.
Happy birding to you, too. That is Olivia Carvalho from Birds Canada, who is in part of Project FeederWatch. I'm lucky where I live. I don't have a feeder, but I have a marsh. I almost said swamp. But it's a swamp. And there are a lot of birds that live around there. And being the amateur photographer that I am, I go out and snap pictures all winter. It's a good winter activity, gets you outside and gets you active. And you don't even have to go outside. If you have a feeder and you can set it up and you join this program, you can sit in front of it and with your bird book in hand or your Merlin app in hand and see what kind of birds. The Merlin app is fantastic. I've used it. It really works well, and it takes the mystery out of, what was that? Right? That's going to do it for the Thursday edition of the program. Tomorrow is the fabulous Friday edition of the show. We have lots in store for you. Our regular guests will be here. Of course, Tim Powers will be here to talk about some of the problems that the Prime Minister is facing these days with his proposal to build a pipeline from Alberta to BC. Tim will be joining us here for that. Cecil will be here as well tomorrow, our sports guru, to give us an idea of what's going to happen. There's a huge game in the NFL tonight that could decide the playoff fate for a couple of teams, and we're getting down to crunch time, so we'll talk to Cecil about that. And, of course, because we ran out of time last week, we'll talk to him about the Blue Jays' latest acquisition, a $200 million pitcher. Is that enough to put them over the top, that extra 90 feet that they needed last year? Anyway, that'll be all part of the program. Alistair will be here with the latest on the forecast and so much more. Thank you very much to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass. We don't do this show without Vanessa, so if she takes a day off, I don't know what I'm going to do. Anyway, she's the best. She really is. Thank you to all of our guests for joining the show and imparting their knowledge upon us. You truly make this for interesting days each and every day. Thank you to all of you who dialed the numbers and joined the conversation. I love the open hours, and I'm looking forward to the Friday Free-for-All tomorrow. Until then, everybody, get out there and enjoy Nova Scotia. Be well, and remember, be kind to one another.